The cradle beneath the earth. In the forgotten forests, there's a clearing where the earth never freezes. They call it the cradle beneath the earth, a pit where children vanish, stolen by shadows that suck the warmth from their skin. No one who enters returns the same, if they return at all. And those who hear the lullaby from the ground are already too late. I was a city kid, but curiosity brought me to the forest at the edge of town where the trees were ancient and silent in a way that felt alive. They told me about the clearing, the place where the earth hummed underfoot, warm even in winter. I didn't believe the stories. Until I heard it. A lullaby, soft and broken, carried on the cold wind as I approached the clearing. The grass was wilted, gray, and the air smelled of old bone and wet earth. In the center was a pit, barely visible, but from it came the music, a voice so sweet and desperate it pulled at my heart. I knelt and peered inside. It was black, endless, and I saw something move beneath the soil, fingers reaching up, pale and trembling. I wanted to run, but my feet were glued to the earth. The hands grabbed me, pulling me down. The ground opened beneath me like a maw, swallowing the world's light. I landed in cold mud, surrounded by children with hollow eyes and mouths sewn shut. They didn't speak. They didn't scream. They just stared as the earth closed over them again, leaving me alone, with the lullaby ringing in my ears, a song meant for those who never sleep again. The Whispering Swamp. No one who ventures into the Whispering Swamp ever truly leaves. The locals say the swamp is alive, not just with frogs or insects, but with voices. Ancient, mournful, and maddening whispers that echo through the mist like ghosts begging for release. Those whispers don't just call you, they consume you, twisting your mind until you become part of the swamp's endless hunger. I never believed the old stories, not until I found myself lost in the heart of that endless, choking swamp. The air was thick with rot and a dampness that soaked through my clothes like icy fingers dragging across my skin. But the worst was the sound. Low, shifting, a chorus of whispers curling through the dense fog that swallowed the trees whole. At first, I thought it was the wind, playing tricks. But then the voices grew clearer, urgent, like desperate cries woven into the rustling leaves and bubbling mud. They called my name. My skin prickled, a cold sweat breaking out as I staggered deeper, the swamp pulling me forward with an unseen force. I heard laughter, childish, high-pitched, but laced with something dark and hungry. Then the ground beneath me shifted. I fell. The mud sucked at my legs, cold and suffocating, and through the murk, I glimpsed pale, rotted hands clawing upward. They gripped me, pulling me beneath the surface. I tried to scream, but the swamp filled my mouth with a sickly, sour taste. The whispers turned to screams inside my head, and I realized, those voices weren't trying to help. They were claiming me. I barely escaped, dragging myself free, but the swamp's voice never left me. Always whispering, always calling me back, waiting for the moment I stopped running. The Midnight Hunter. There's a creature that prowls the forests at midnight, tall and thin, with eyes like burning embers and limbs that bend too far, moving with unnatural grace. The Midnight Hunter never speaks, it only hunts. The victims it chooses disappear without a trace, leaving behind nothing but shredded clothes and a silence so deep it shatters your mind. I always thought I was prepared for the woods, grew up hunting, knew every rustle and snap. But nothing prepares you for the midnight when the forest falls utterly silent, and something watches from the shadows, waiting. I saw it the first time when my flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into darkness so thick it felt suffocating. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the faintest glow, two burning orange eyes hovering between the trees, staring directly at me. It was tall. Too tall, impossibly so, with limbs that twisted and curved like dead branches. I froze, heart hammering, every instinct screaming to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The thing moved like liquid shadow, silent as the grave, closing the distance with impossible speed. I tripped and fell, scraping my hands against broken bark as it loomed over me. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth soaked in dark blood. I scrambled backward, feeling the air grow colder with every breath. Behind me, the forest erupted in guttural growls and twigs snapping, but no one else was there, only the hunter. I ran until I couldn't, collapsing in a clearing bathed in pale moonlight, but the marks on my clothes told the truth. The midnight hunter had been close enough to brush me with its claws, tearing through flesh and fabric alike. I never returned to those woods. And sometimes, when the wind is right, I swear I hear those burning eyes watching from the dark, waiting for midnight to come again. The weaver of flesh, in a forgotten village, they whispered about a woman who could weave flesh and bone like thread, stitching her victims into grotesque tapestries of living horror. They called her the Weaver of Flesh, a name spoken only in trembling fear. Her creations were said to move, whispering secrets in the dark, begging to be freed from their sewn prison. I should never have gone to the abandoned village, but curiosity is a cruel master. The locals wouldn't speak of the Weaver, just warned me to stay away. But I needed to know. When I arrived, the village was swallowed by silence, buildings crumbling like decayed skin peeling from bone. In the center was a cottage, its windows black voids staring like empty sockets. Inside, I found her. She was thin, too thin, her hands twisting strips of raw flesh, sewing sinew and skin with rusty needles. Around her were horrifying tapestries, human bodies intertwined, faces frozen in silent screams, limbs stitched together in impossible patterns. They writhed, slowly, like puppets struggling against their strings. She looked at me with eyes so cold they froze my blood. "You'll make a fine addition," she whispered, voice like dried leaves scraping. I tried to run, but she lunged, dragging me into her web of skin and bone. The needles pierced my flesh again and again, weaving me into her horrific art. Pain exploded through my body, burning and tearing. I could feel my limbs stretching, melding, becoming part of something monstrous. And through it all, I heard the others, voices sewn into the flesh, begging for release, trapped forever in her nightmarish loom. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was her smile, sharp and terrible, as she pulled the threads tight. The drowned bride, they say the drowned bride waits beneath the surface of the lake, her wedding dress tattered and stained with the mud and blood of her final moments. On moonless nights, she rises to seek vengeance on those who hear her sorrowful song, pulling them beneath the waves to join her eternal, drowning embrace. The lake was always quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you hear your own heartbeat thrumming like a drum. They told me about the bride, how she drowned on her wedding day, betrayed by the man she loved. I was a fool to go there at night. The water was glassy, reflecting the black sky like a mirror. Then I heard her, a haunting melody drifting across the waves, fragile and desperate, like a lullaby for the dead. I watched, frozen, as a figure emerged from the water. Her dress torn, clinging to her pale skin, hair floating like seaweed in the cold. Her eyes were empty pools of grief, black and endless. She reached for me, hands like cold dead things, dragging me toward the water's edge. I struggled, but her grip was like iron, pulling me down, deeper into the freezing depths. I tasted blood and mud, felt my lungs scream for air. Underneath the surface, I saw dozens of faces, lost souls caught in her embrace, eyes wide with terror and sorrow. She whispered my name, a promise of endless night, and I knew the lake would never let me go. I woke gasping on the shore, soaked and bleeding, but the scent of decay clung to my skin, and in my pocket, I found a single wet rose, blackened and dripping with water from the depths. The shadow on the stairs. Every old house has its shadows, but some shadows walk with purpose. They creep just beyond the edge of your vision, whispering secrets you're better off not knowing. The shadow on the stairs is a legend told in fearful tones, of a darkness that waits for midnight to descend, then climbs the stairs to claim those foolish enough to be awake. I never believed in ghosts, not really. But when I moved into that old farmhouse, everything changed. At first, it was small things, cold drafts, whispered sounds, footsteps on the wooden stairs when no one else was home. One night, I stayed up late, working on a project, when I saw it. An inky black shape, coiling and twisting just beyond the lamplight. It moved with unnatural speed, climbing the stairs silently. I wanted to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. The shadow paused halfway up, stretching long and thin like a living nightmare. Its form twisted into something vaguely human, with eyes that burned a terrible red, full of hatred and ancient hunger. I backed away, but it followed, rising step by step, closer and closer. My heart hammered as the air grew thick and suffocating. I stumbled backward, falling down the stairs as the shadow reached for me, its touch cold enough to freeze my blood, sharp enough to cut. I scrambled away, but every night since, it waits at the bottom of the stairs, patient and relentless. Sometimes, when the house creaks and groans, I hear it whisper my name. And I know one night, it will come for me. The bleeding mannequin. There's an old rumor about a department store mannequin. One unlike the others, that bleeds when the lights go out and moves on its own. Employees whisper that it's the restless soul of a woman murdered inside those very walls, cursed to relive her death again and again, dragging victims into the silent dark where her bloody madness lives forever. I took the night shift at the old department store mostly for the quiet hours and the paycheck, but what I found was something worse than boredom. Something alive in the shadows where mannequins stood frozen like silent sentinels. It started with the blood, thin, dark streaks dripping from the eyes of one mannequin, staining the polished floor beneath. I told myself it was rust or a prank, but the air around it grew heavy and cold, like the breath of death itself. One night, the lights flickered and died, plunging the store into absolute darkness. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, but before I could even blink, a whisper filled the air. A voice so dry and raspy it sounded like death rattling in a throat. The mannequin was gone from its spot. I stumbled backward as a slow, wet scraping sound dragged across the tiles, and then the mannequin appeared inches from my face, its eyes wide and black, a red glistening slit where its mouth should have been. Blood oozed from its cracked lips, pooling on the floor. It reached out with fingers that flexed like joints snapping in slow motion, its nails stained with something dark and sticky. Panic seized me as I turned to run, but the aisle seemed to stretch endlessly, twisted into a maze of cold steel and glass. Behind me, the wet scraping grew louder, accompanied by that raspy whisper, chanting my name like a curse. The last thing I saw was a hand, cold, rigid, and stained with fresh blood, closing over my wrist. They never found my body, just a pool of crimson with faint, bloody footprints leading back to that cursed mannequin. The hollow child. In some towns, they warn you about the hollow child, a pale, silent figure that appears at twilight near the playgrounds, with eyes too black and empty to be human, and a mouth sewn shut with coarse black thread. It doesn't speak, but it watches, and if you meet its gaze, it steals something from your soul, leaving you hollow, forever haunted by what's missing. I was just a kid when I first saw it, standing motionless at the edge of the playground as the sun slipped away. Its skin was white as ash, and its eyes, black pits deeper than any darkness I'd ever known, locked onto me like a predator sizing up prey. But the worst was the mouth, crudely stitched shut with thick, black thread that pulled tight against pale skin. It didn't move, but I could feel its eyes crawling beneath my skin, hollowing me out from the inside. The air around it felt heavy, like suffocating in thick fog, and every breath I took tasted like dust and rot. I ran, but the emptiness followed me, an invisible weight dragging at my chest, squeezing until I could barely think. At night, I woke gasping, feeling fingers like cold thorns tracing down my spine. Sometimes, I swear I hear that silent child laughing just beyond my window, its stitched mouth twitching into a smile too terrible to describe. One morning, I looked in the mirror and saw my own eyes beginning to darken, empty and hollow. Like the child had stolen something vital, something I might never get back. The dollmaker's curse. They say the dollmaker was a madman who sewed the souls of children into his dolls, trapping their screams inside tiny porcelain faces. His workshop burned down decades ago, but every Halloween, new dolls appear on doorsteps, eyes glassy and lifelike, with faint whispers of agony coming from within. Those who take them home never sleep again, and some disappear without a trace. When I found the doll on my doorstep that chilly October night, I thought it was a prank, just a creepy toy left by some neighbor. But the moment I touched its cracked porcelain face, a sharp chill stabbed through me, and I heard something beneath the silence, a faint, high-pitched scream muffled behind layers of cracked paint. The doll's glassy eyes followed me everywhere, gleaming in the dark with an unnatural light. At night, I heard soft tapping sounds, like fingernails drumming on wood, and whispers that seemed to crawl up from the floorboards, begging me to look closer. I found myself drawn to the doll, unable to resist tracing the delicate stitches that held it together, even as the screams grew louder, piercing, desperate, and maddening. My dreams became nightmares, filled with little hands clawing at my skin, dragging me down into an abyss of porcelain shards and blood. Then one night, I woke to find the doll had moved, sitting upright on my chest, its mouth cracked open, releasing a hollow, echoing wail that shook the room. When I screamed, the neighbors heard nothing, only silence. By morning, the doll was gone, and so was I. The crying woman of the highway. Late at night on desolate highways, drivers report a pale woman in white standing by the roadside, her face streaked with tears of blood. She asks for a ride, but those who stop find themselves trapped in a nightmare. They never reach their destination, and some vanish entirely, swallowed by a road that twists into darkness. It was just past midnight when I saw her, standing by the edge of the highway, a ghostly figure illuminated by the weak glow of my headlights. Her white dress fluttered in the cold wind, soaked and stained with dark red tears streaming from hollow eyes that seemed to burn with sorrow and rage. Against every instinct, I pulled over, heart hammering as she slid into the passenger seat without a word. Her cold fingers brushed my arm, ice sinking deep into my flesh. The road ahead twisted and warped, no longer the familiar highway but a labyrinth of shadows and impossible turns. She whispered a name I didn't recognize, voice cracking like a dry leaf, and the radio crackled with static, drowning out everything else. I tried to turn back, but the steering wheel locked, the car trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The tears on her face turned to blood, dripping down to stain my hands as she reached for my throat. The world blurred, the road devoured by darkness, and I felt myself slipping away, pulled under by the weeping woman who had waited, patient and hungry, for someone foolish enough to stop. The forsaken children of the woods. Deep in forgotten forests, there's a legend of children born without faces, silent, wandering in packs, eyes always watching from behind tangled branches. They steal voices, laughter, even memories, leaving their victims hollow shells lost to madness. The forest is alive with their cries, and those who enter rarely return, and if they do, they're never the same. I thought it was just an old tale until I found myself lost under the canopy of twisted trees, shadows thick and suffocating, the sun swallowed whole by rotting branches. Then I heard them, soft footsteps and muffled giggles, barely audible over my own ragged breathing. Through the gloom, I saw pale shapes moving, their faces smooth and empty like porcelain dolls stripped of paint. They surrounded me silently, their eyes black voids that bore into my soul, freezing me in place with cold, empty hunger. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone, stolen, taken by those faceless children who circled closer, reaching with hands that felt like cold, dead leaves. They pressed to my skin, fingers sinking in as memories slipped away, my name, my family, even my own reflection faded into darkness. Days later, I stumbled out of that nightmare forest, but my mind was shattered, broken by the silent curse of those forsaken children. Now I hear their laughter at the edge of every shadow, waiting to steal what little remains.